Ladies and gentlemen, greetings and welcome to Global Bookkeeping Week for 2020. I welcome Mr. Peter Thorpe, Director of ABA, to join me. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Matthew. How are you doing this fine Monday morning?
Good. It's sunny for the third day in the row in Melbourne, so thoroughly enjoying. So greetings to all and welcome to Global Bookkeeping Week, a week of really celebrating the world of bookkeeping, who bookkeepers are, and getting the world to join with us in the recognition of who we are, what we do, and how we do it. Pete, do you want to talk a little bit about the two associations joining together?
Mate, absolutely. Yeah, it's actually good to be part of Global Bookkeeping Week. And how we came to be sitting here on this screen together is there's been a greater spirit of cooperation between our two associations of recent date. We've always worked well together on with government and various submissions and what have you. So we've looked to expand that a little bit. And one of the projects we had on the horizon to hold hands together, so to speak, was the Global Bookkeeping Week initiative. So a little bit of work behind the scenes, and we said, okay, well, let's see what we can do together to make a better Global Bookkeeping Week out of all of this. So I guess before we jump into what each of our organisations have in store for Global Bookkeeping Week, Matthew, you want to just give us a little bit of a background, or give anyone who's listening a bit of a background of the Global Bookkeeping Week story.
Thanks, Pete. And I've done a great job as the host and not done any of the housekeeping type things. So I'm hoping you're not watching us mime at the moment and your audio is working. You can swap to telephone to hear it. We will be keeping all participants muted for the session. And maybe towards the later part of the session, Pete and I might open up and have a conversation with you, depending how we're going for timing and other interactions. Please use the question and answer or the chat panel. I notice there's one hand up in the session. If maybe, Deb, you could throw a comment in the chat rather than us open the audio up at this point in time. As Pete alluded to, Global Bookkeeping Week is about celebrating the bookkeeping industry, the bookkeeping profession, and the value bookkeepers bring to small business. At the start of the session, I had the Global Bookkeeping Week .com.au website open, where we had the two, had the website, the international presence, the link to the association respective web pages as well. We are about celebrating bookkeepers, and this particular initiative of Global Bookkeeping Week has been running for formally 6 years. Initially coming out of ICB in the UK, where they started linking a few theories together and a few concepts, a few discussion papers together, and now we've got it throughout the world. So we have Global Bookkeeping Week being celebrated in all of New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Philippines, India, UK, Ireland, and the USA, as far as we know. And,
can you say that again? That was impressive.
Yeah, so down the bottom of the slide, New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Philippines, India, UK, Ireland, and the USA. And well, also left out of this slide, and I did have it, was parts of Europe. So we certainly have a good pickup through our associated organisations in Europe as well. Bookkeepers are getting recognised, Pete, and as you and I know, we've been at that advocacy forefront. Getting people to recognise bookkeepers, to actually celebrate bookkeepers. The small business people that work with bookkeepers tend to understand us, but there's a bit more here. So this Global Bookkeeping Week is about opening up, having a week of celebration, getting the promotion out there, and really working forward in developing the professionalism and the positioning of bookkeepers.
Yeah, that's the thing that really appealed to us, mate, was there is plenty to celebrate, and we look at where our profession is now and maybe where it was, say, 20 years ago, and there is plenty to celebrate. The profession has evolved, and our organisations have been along there pushing it along for all it's worth. So, I was doing I've got a session. We're doing a session on Tuesday before we come to what we're doing later on, and we're going to talk about, we look backwards at what ABN had done over the last 20 years. And we thought, geez, 20 years ago, the tax department didn't know what a bookkeeper was, needed some convincing that they even existed. And you look at where we are now, where we've got such an array of services that, in 20 short years, and 20 years sounds like a long time, but it's not. But we've got, you look at the acknowledgement that it's now gone through. Tax office are now supplying so much material, full recognition. You've got lodgement extensions, you've got lodgement platforms. There's so much work there, recognised under TASA. So it's now a recognised professional group in terms of TASA. So the profession's evolved so much in 20 years, and it's really pleasing to see. We look at the various levels of government that we collectively work in, and there's much greater recognition. There's greater standing, I believe, in the greater business community, although I still think we've got a ways to go there. And I still think in government, they're still just dipping their toes in and getting to understand our market. We've built, and what's pleasing to see out of our survey, and I'm sure yours bears the same thing out, that our bookkeeping community is evolving. Their businesses are evolving, and they're becoming far more structured and far more business-like. You see the percentage that actually employ other bookkeepers or employ more bookkeepers is growing, and has been a growing trend for the last little bit. So they're building more mature businesses than perhaps early days. The software specialist skill set that has been evolved by our profession is just, it's outstanding. It's awesome. I reflect on the accounting industry, and I look at the ability to use software at its operational level, and bookkeepers are miles ahead of the accounting profession as far as that goes. That's the profession they live in, and the width of software that they have to adopt is just mind blowing. So big pats on back. We've and as you've been a very big part of, where our associations have been connected with government to make a lot of this stuff happen. It doesn't happen by itself. So we've been working very closely with government, and you've had a big role to play in that, mate. Do you want to give our listeners just a bit of a sense as to where we've gone with government, a little bit of a journey as to where our profession has moved through the various government bodies that we interact with?
Thanks, Pete. And you're right, the 20-year journey is a little bit stunning. And when your ABN first kicked off, I think you just said 20 years ago, Pete, ICB kicked off a few years later. I don't think government really understood in those days that bookkeepers were actually lodging forms with the tax office. The world of preparing payroll and the end of year payment sum or group certificates in the days gone by. Actually,
just funny on that, I remember distinctly sitting across the table from someone at the tax office, and they said, no, there's not. I said, there's bookkeepers at this. No, I don't think there is. I said, well, because our stats show that that people do their own BASs. We've got 95% of tax returns are done by accountants, and 50% of them are done by accountants, and the rest are done by the business themselves. And I said, well, that 50%, a good chunk of that is actually done by bookkeepers. And they finally came to realise before they turned the tap on and go, you know what, you're right. So yeah, it is. It's amazing. Just that first step in realisation was a momentous point, I think.
And it was good of the ATO who started recognising on the back of some of that consultations and pushing that bookkeepers existed. We had what was the old section 251L of recognising bookkeepers were allowed to at least exist and liaise with the tax office at one level.
Yeah.
And then we got rumours of the Tax Agent Services Act coming along. And I was really pleased that we got into rooms with Treasury right at the start of that concept. And Pete, it was good that Treasury recognised bookkeepers and recognised 251L was too limited. Yeah. And started creating the world of the BAS agent, which, as we all know, not all bookkeepers are BAS agents, but all BAS agents are bookkeepers, just by definition of what we get into, meaning the world of bookkeeper. government have come a long way. Getting inside Treasury and inside Treasury policy discussions, I'm going to tell you, is an ongoing challenge. And Pete and I could give you lots of stories of conversations that just do not happen outside the big white buildings. But there's increasingly discussions that we are in. Tax office lead the field, and I'm happy to go on the recording of this session to go. Tax office lead the field in consultations.
Yeah, they do.
Let me say they don't always get it right. There's some feedback loops that become amusing. But where bookkeeping has emerged to in Australia is we sit in the rooms with the Deputy Commissioners of Taxation. We sit in the rooms as they are thinking about how to implement things like JobKeeper and now the JobMaker hiring credit. We're sitting in the rooms, we're seeing their intentions, and we're chatting. We have come a long, long way. We sit in the discussions about where technology is going to take us and where government administration and the regulators are going to take us. I'm also really pleased, Pete, just the way even an organisation like Fair Work. If you go back 5 or 6 years, I mean, we all lived in fear of Fair Work. They didn't talk to us. They were the big stick and the big threat to us all. Whereas now, yes, we have a different Fair Work Ombudsman in the chair, but I'm going to say I think their whole style has changed a bit, Pete. Would you agree with organisations like that?
Yeah, they were the Department of No, I think, from memory. They were pretty hard to deal with early on, and they seemed to be almost an advocacy group for employees, and that was the end. But I think you're right. I think we're seeing a bit more of a move to educate employers who are trying to do the right thing. At the end of the day, most employers want to do the right thing, and they want to go somewhere to get advice and guidance that is on the mark. And if the regulator doesn't speak to both employees and employers, it's pretty tough. But I think they've moved, and I think it's a good thing. Actually, just reflecting on you're saying that the doors that we've been able to open, and you just think how tough this would have been trying to get through JobKeeper had that not been the case. Because I think so many of our members were at the absolute coalface and making JobKeeper happen for their clients. And had we not been that close, I just wonder what it would have looked like. But anyway, it's there's plenty of good stuff's come out of it.
So this week is about celebrating some of that journey and involvement of bookkeepers. Pete called out, the involvement of the software companies. So again, if I look at how bookkeepers have kicked goals, think about, 20 years, 25 years ago, pre-GST, where we were with business software. The accounting firm I was working in some, whatever it was, 25, 35, 40 years ago, we were selling packages where it was $10,000 for the general ledger. It was another $10,000 for the accounts receivable.
Yep.
And along came small business accounting software, changed the face, and it's the bookkeeping community who changed the face of small business accounting. We took the MYBs and the reckons, and then the zeros when Xero came along, and the Intuits when it had its regurgitation with Reckon about who owned QuickBooks. That journey, bookkeepers have been at the lead. So, Pete, we go into a week of celebrations and a week of different activities. Do you just want to take us a little bit into, I've changed the script here, Pete, but I'll get you to do it first.
That's all right. Just been how you got your slides ordered, but if you want to, which is next, we can sort of go through what we've got planned for Global Bookkeeping Week. You're happy to start with me?
Go for it.
Okay, so it's a pretty full-on week we've got sort of lined up. So day one, which is today. First event is something we've not done like this in a public forum before, is a catch-up with the two of our organisations just to preview the start of Global Bookkeeping Week. And we've got a couple of few sessions through the week where we're jointly working on them, which is really terrific. So other than this session that we're doing right now, from our website, you got the ability to hook into a video recording of an interview we did with Tax Office in relation to OSFA. We had David Baker, and that was a tremendous session. So he was working with Kelvin, and they talked about where OSFA had gone. And there's a lot going on with OSFA, a little bit behind the scenes. Sometimes they sneak improvements in there and didn't quite tell us about it, or didn't yell out enough. So that session's really good. So it brings you up to speed with where OSFA's at, and a little bit of a look forward as to where it's going. That's a good session, good video. So I commend that one to you. On Tuesday, we have, let me see where I'm at. So Tuesday, we've got a couple of things. We've got another video there, which was around STP troubleshooting. So that was an interview Kerry Jarius, one of our directors, did with Angela Lehman at the tax office. And that got into the nitty gritty of STP, given that we've just gone through the first full year of the micro or the smaller businesses jumping through the STP hoop. I know there's still a few to go, but that was a big learning curve. So that jumped into a lot of the problems that were encountered through STP and some of the troubleshooting and fixes to work around that. So that's a really tremendous session. I commend that one to you as well. We've got a session which is a little bit selfish. We didn't invite you to this one, Matthew, but it's Kelvin and I and Leanne having a bit of introspective, if you like, just a look as to that journey that ABN as an organisation had been on across this 20 years, and the things that we'd seen from our perspective change and evolve, which is I've got no idea what that is going to look like, because I've been away for a week. So, but I reckon it'll be a good fun session. On Wednesday we have another recording with the tax office. Well, actually with the Tax Practitioners Board. This was a really good one. I did this one. Well, it was good from the other guys. I was a bit average, but it was. I had Greg Lewis from the tax board, and we were talking about offshoring and outsourcing, and that was a really good session. So we're looking at the what the TPB allow insofar as offshoring and outsourcing, and some of the things to watch out for. That was an enjoyable session to do with Greg, so I commend that one to anyone who's looking at outsourcing or offshoring, and bear in mind outsourcing can be just as closely done locally. So good session, that one. On Wednesday, we've also got one of the joint sessions I spoke of earlier with ICB. So it's we have a panel hosted by MYOB's Daniel West, and he's going to be speaking with Kerry Jarius from our end, and Kelvin, and from ICB's got Rob Marshall and Amanda Linton, CEO there. That'll be a fun session, and they are going to look at what a professional bookkeeper is, and we're going to touch on that in a little while. On Thursday, we've got a couple of sessions. So we've got a recorded video with the tax office that we did with. I did that one with Sylvia Gallagher, and we looked at Beyond JobKeeper. So it was recorded a few weeks ago. So at that stage, Victoria was still in deep lockdown, and it was really looking at what's likely to evolve over the next little bit, insofar as it affects our bookkeepers and their evolution through and out the other side of JobKeeper, and that of their clients, and the various things that now become sort of front of mind, rather than scrambling around trying to get their subsidy through. We're now looking at life beyond and what's going to be left behind to solve and fix. So it was a really good session, and some good perspective there from the tax office. We also have another joint session there about COVID lessons that we've learned through the mire, and I think it's up here. I say it's a distant memory. It's not a distant memory. It's left some carnage everywhere, and different parts of the country got affected in varying levels. So it's good to unpack that. So we've got a good joint session there, and that one's going to be hosted by Amanda Linton from your office. It's got Kerry Jarius on board from our office, and we've also got the amazing Di Crawford Errington from ICNZB. Is that right? ICNZB. Actually, I did a session with Di on last Friday with MYOB, and she's a good character. So on Friday, we're coming to a bit of a close. So what are we doing on Friday? On Friday, we have a couple of sessions. We've got actually an interesting session. We've got another video there with the tax office, and we well, I spoke to a guy called Martin Main, who's heavily involved in what's there on the technology front. So we looked at the recent technology that had been implemented at their end, that we're starting to see bits and pieces of. We looked at some of the things that are in introduction mode. We're starting to, maybe in beta or very near coming. And then we looked at a little bit further out to those things that we can expect to see, which is a good session. And I was pleased to catch up with him on that one. And finally, on day 4, and in the spirit of Global Bookkeeping Week initiative to raise a cup, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to raise a glass in ABN style, and we're going to have a number of people that contributed to the last 20 years. So we're actually going to be toasting the last 20 years of the movement of the bookkeeping profession. So we've got some people from tax and TPB, past, so not current members. We've got some people from software companies, again past, who were connectors of the bookkeeping profession to the software companies rather than being an advocate for the software companies. And we've got a number of our practicing bookkeepers, some very long standing and some very, very recent. And we're just going to have a chat about the last 20 years and toast the journey that bookkeepers have been on. Mate, so that's it in a week. We've got a lot to get through. At the ICB end, what have you got in store for us?
Thanks, Pete. So again, just getting access to the ICB schedule from the Global Bookkeeping Week site that will link through to the ICB site and Global Bookkeeping Week agenda page. I'll just blow that up a little bit. Our network meetings for the week run on, and several of the network meetings are meeting with a specific Global Bookkeeping Week celebration type effect. And if you run through the page, you got the session Peter and I are currently in now. We've got a session later this afternoon about how to stay connected with ICB. Rob Marshall's going to host a series of quick snapshots of just how to stay connected and how to stay in the information session. We've got an MYOB session in there. Power up your client data reviews using MYOB and the essentials. We've got a couple of technical sessions running during the week. So unusual payroll, and I think there's one there of unusual terminations. Later on in the week. So
yeah, that should be good.
The Tuesday, future of the tax profession, where I'm going to do a little bit of brainstorming and a little bit of speaking just about what I see is on the agenda for the future of the tax profession going forward, with a real bent from the government point of view, what I see government doing to us and what I see our potential is to properly engage. On Wednesday, I'm going to narrow that down a little bit more and just talk about the next 90 days, because I'm not sure about you, Pete, but I'm finding that if we don't chunk the world down a little bit at the moment, 30-day snapshots, what's on my radar for 30 days, I'm going to talk about the next 90 days.
Yep.
JobKeeper will roll, JobMaker hiring will happen. We've got January right at the moment as I speak. We've still got some January 14 deadlines, which are a bit ugly. I'm hoping that even maybe by Wednesday when I'm talking about that, we might have some good news from the tax office. On Wednesday, there is a joint session there where we're going to talk a bit about what is a professional bookkeeper, how that is being defined and how that is being talked to. And Pete and I are just going to cover off on that concept a little bit as an introduction to that session on Wednesday. We've got that session Pete talked about, the COVID lessons learned, technical session Thursday, unusual terminations, discussing digital technology with your clients. So Leanne Berry and Rob Marshall will talk about digital technology and how to get our clients excited about it. There are some significant programs from the government with digital grants and digital funding happening to help our businesses engage with digital. So we would encourage you to have a look at that digital technology session. And on Friday, I'm going to get as many members of our board as I can on board, excuse the pun, to have just a chat and an introduction session, chatting with the board just about where we're at as ICB in our total governance framework. So between the two associations, you might see some conflicts in the timing there. That's not deliberate, it's just scheduling, guys. We both wanted to run a whole series of activities, and in order to make them work, you'll see that Pete has talked about sessions that become available. All the ICB sessions will be recorded and will be available through the website as recorded sessions after they happen in a live environment.
Mate, there's plenty to get through there, isn't there?
It would be a big CPE week, Pete. A big CPE week.
Interested in your next 90 days. I mean, there is a lot going to be happening in the next 90 days, isn't there? Like the job maker credit that's got to unpack pretty quickly. But actually, something that's a little bit under the radar, I reckon, around that is the job trainer initiative. It's a bit of a sleeping one, potentially quite a good initiative. The details at this stage seem a little bit vague, or in some states it's better developed than others. It seems to me that it relies on the federal and state governments holding hands and being friendly towards one another, which is sort of something that really hasn't been evident in many cases over the last little bit. But it's a joint initiative, so they've got to jointly get their acts together. I jumped on the site for the fair state of Queensland the other day, and it was noticeably bare. But in theory, good initiative. 12 months, up to 50% of salary covered, which is better than the job maker if you're looking to quantify it in dollars, and in theory some concessional training money, so either free or cheaper qualifications or short courses. So that's a good initiative as well if it gets all the support that it needs at a government level.
Yeah, devil's in the detail, Pete, on that one.
Absolutely.
I agree by name and by announcement. I think it has some real wins. I'm waiting to see it.
They'll all run up the hill together and it will all end well. Trust me.
Pete, we've alluded to a couple of times and we've talked about a couple of sessions here. One of the initiatives that together we have been talking through and talking about just one of those aspects of the world that doesn't always, I suppose, come to a solution really easily. So we've got a few things on the table. Pete, answering this, do you want to take us in, or do you want me to talk?
Yeah. Look, it's one of those initiatives we collectively put our heads together and said, what do we think about that? What do we think the standing of bookkeepers is in the greater community? And when I say community, I'm talking the small business community, but also accountants and the peers and their peers, the accountants' peers and their own peers, and government. Is the standing where it really should be? And I guess Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, and the profession's come a long way in a very short period of time, and it takes it takes a while, a lot of history for that sort of general credibility and standing builds. So what can we as a collective group of associations do to speed that, but give that some speed along a little bit and actually give it some common recognition, so that we can all the greater communities both win out of this thing. So we figured between ourselves that if we came up with a term, we'll start with a notion of a term that we both agree to. We say, okay, well, and given that our two associations cover effectively all of the association bookkeepers in Australia, maybe other than maybe some of the accounting associations, but the vast majority of members of the two organisations. So it's integral or crucial that the two of us get together and come up with a term that we can both agree on. Otherwise, everyone's running their own race. And I think we worked on the collective idea that we're better together on this one, because if collectively we use a term that has some recognition, from ourselves, from the associations themselves, but also collectively as a group of peers, if they recognise the term and we all float with the same message, then it will gradually get pushed out into the greater community. So that was the genesis of the idea. But the term itself actually has to mean something to the bookkeeping community, and that really only happens if we all use the same term. We've all got to use the same thing, otherwise we're one of these or one of those or one of those, and the general community goes, well, I don't understand the difference, because you all call yourself something different. So how do I know if I got a good one? So it works if we get some commonality of term. At the moment, I don't think that there's any single term that's got general cut through to the greater bookkeeping bookkeeper consuming community. So we're talking small business world out there. What term do they look at and go, that means something. I know I've got a great bookkeeper because I got someone with this label on it. We know that the TPB has used the term BAS agent, and that has got cut through, but really only as deep as the BAS agents themselves. It hasn't gone to the wider community. If you went to Fred the plumber and say, I need a BAS agent, or what's a BAS agent, he'd have no idea, to be honest. So the TPB have done a reasonable job in spreading the term amongst our community, but not the business community. So the business community who is looking to get a quality bookkeeper, I'll use the term bookkeeper, looking for quality work, they're not going to intuitively gravitate to this term BAS agent. It just doesn't mean anything to them. So they're going to be looking for something else that's got some commonality. And the more places they see the same message in the same term, then it starts to cut through. So we figured that the term also actually has to mean something in its plain English interpretation. So if it's got you can't call someone a butcher if they're a bookkeeper. It's got to be a term that evokes what you do and evokes quality. So we looked for some terms that came up with that notion that if you heard the term, you would at least say, that might be a good bookkeeper because I like the term, and it sort of means something in its common English interpretation. The other aspect of the thing is that the term could have, because if we stick on a single term, that sort of tends to closet people into a four-wall definition. You could have varying disciplines within the greater term that someone works. You could have someone who's a general, we'll call them a general BAS agent in the current term, but a bookkeeper in practice. Or you might have someone who might specialise in payroll. How do you differentiate between the two, and can you actually effectively do that? So we set forward to come up with a term, and a lot of backwards and forwardsing that we did, and we said, okay, well, it's got to be more than just a term. It's got to actually mean something, and it's got to mean the same thing to everyone. So it embraces the concept of some common traits and achievements and benchmarks that marry to that term, and collectively the two organisations would support the same traits. So that means that someone who has consumed bookkeeping service in the outside community has got an ICB expert, that's not the term we've used, or a ABN expert. It means the same thing. It means they've got the same traits and qualifiers that they're standing in front of the same client with. So it's a more homogenized set of qualifications and experience traits that we're looking at. So that's sort of the backdrop from behind it, from where we've come with this thing. Mate, do you want to share the designation that the two boards have settled on, and some of the values that we're actually looking to promote as part of that designation?
Thanks, Pete. So Pete has encapsulated there, how do we change the narrative? How do we get people to really think about what is it that I'm looking for when I engage a bookkeeper? And the term bookkeeper has been around for hundreds of years. Rob Marshall, one of our directors, has done a good history of that that is released through our website, and he's gone back to Luca Pacioli. Bookkeeper is a known term. I've had some people, Pete, and I'm sure you have, said, what are we going to rebrand bookkeepers as? What's the new term? Whereas I go, well, bookkeeper is a known term. It's out there, but in our country, it is not a protected term. The term that we jointly have discussed and come forward with and are trying to set a different benchmark and a different understanding out there is as simple and as complex as the term professional bookkeeper. And what we're going to do is attach definitions and explanations to the term professional bookkeeper, and have the world, when they go, are you a bookkeeper or are you a professional bookkeeper? And together in Australia, we're going to lead the discussion, the promotion, the definition, and the words. So you're going to see on the ABA website, you're going to see on the ICB website, professional bookkeeper defined the same way. And some of those terms includes that in Australia, as we lead this definition, lead this discussion, the two associations that are loudly in the public space and actively in the public space both have the same common term out there. So if you Googled professional bookkeeper, what we're aiming is both our sites will come up. And if you were to compare the two sites, you're going to see similar words around this is the traits of a professional bookkeeper.
Yep.
So we're uniting on this and pushing it out there. Where we see this go is when government think bookkeeper, they're now going to have the ability to go and have a look at pages that define the traits of a professional bookkeeper. Who are they? What are they? When we think bookkeeper and we want to recognize bookkeepers, how does that sit? And the term bookkeeper, I see the Tax Practitioner Board leveraging off, Pete, because where we've defined this is it doesn't contradict the BAS agent and the terms behind a registered BAS agent. It actually complements and is inclusive of all that code of conduct and such things. Mm. So we get into explaining to the business community, explaining to government, what is a professional bookkeeper. So we are setting a benchmark. We're setting a definition range. We're saying they're experienced, that there is an independent verification of the quantity and quality of experience. So it can't be somebody straight out of a uni course who hasn't actually done it. Now, both of our associations have solutions and attractions and approaches to develop a bookkeeper into being, through their education, gaining experience and becoming what would be a professional bookkeeper. And we're both going to set pathways to a newbie becoming professional.
Yeah.
So there's experience, there's evidence of commitment to enhancing skills. Now think CPE or CPD, whichever particular letter you like. Continuing professional development, continuing professional education. Both our associations have it. The TPB requires it for a BAS agent. We believe if you are truly professional, you must be on the cutting edge. You must know what's going on. You must be using the current software. So we're going to set some parameters and some words around having both experience, but having a commitment to being enhancing your skills.
Yeah.
Clearly, as professional associations for Australia, we're going to table that you need to be endorsed and involved in an association. Now, that's not just a biased sales point from us. That is saying that what is the conduit of good information to a bookkeeper? Where do you stay attached to be right on the cutting edge, to know what's going on, to know how to develop yourself as a professional bookkeeper? And so clearly we believe you need to be endorsed, attached and in the information channel from our respective associations.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that endorsement is a big deal. Like if you're one of 10,000 in the greater community, how do you make yourself stand out with a term that that's going to mean something to the business community? Whereas if you've got the only two bookkeeper associations in the country saying Julie is a professional bookkeeper, and either would salute Julie as a professional bookkeeper, that term has the implied endorsement around that common use, that common English use of those terms, and it says that these two organisations effectively endorse that Julie has attained the professional bookkeeper designation, and we as an organisation stand behind the traits that we say that Julie's achieved. So I think that's a big part of it, and it's the, as I see it at the moment, what's missing is taking the business community along for the ride to say, okay, yes, you can be a BAS agent, that's great, but that means nothing to the greater small business community out there, and it really should. So it's about lifting the standing of bookkeepers by use of a common designation, commonly saluted by the two organisations that hold the membership base of Australian bookkeepers, and saying, okay, well, you should be using Julie. And that's the way Julie can set herself apart from the rest, by saying, well, ICB reckon Julie's a professional bookkeeper. So does ABA. And so does ABA. So there's a commonality there, and it's some way that you can set yourself apart. But that's only part of the journey, isn't it, mate? We then there's the obligation on us all to carry that term. It's not something we can hatch in isolation and keep it to ourselves, because I think that is partly the fault of the BAS agent designation. There was a great term shared with the bookkeeping community, and that was it. It hasn't carried a little bit through to government, but it hasn't really cut through to the business community, and that's what we're looking to achieve out of this, isn't it? Or it's one giant part of this thing.
So what you're going to find is the two associations separately and occasionally jointly promoting this term, developing it. This is the term we're going to seek for others to be using in the space and really setting the benchmark for the role.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at the steps that we'd like to see in the implementation, I mean, again, early days, so I'd love to have this thing totally fleshed out. We haven't, but we've got a lot of common ground here, and it'll develop over the coming months. But what we clearly need to come up with a term that's aspirational, so that, as I say, the new bookkeeper comes along and says, okay, I need to be recognised by these organisations. I need to be recognised by industry out there. So it needs to be an aspirational sort of a term that they want to. The greater bookkeeping community has to get on board with it, because they need to encourage others to pursue it. It needs to be promoted by them. It needs to be a term that they would salute and fly up their own flagpole and say, this is a term that means something that I'm proud of, something they push out into the business community themselves. And they're saying that, okay, I'm a professional bookkeeper, so says ICB, so says ABA. Client goes, okay, well, curiosity, so what's one of those? Terms are commonly agreed and saluted. So they're actually part of the solution. That as a collective, if bookkeepers are promoting this term in anything and everything that they do, through their various lines, through their websites, through their email signatures, through their designations and in how they present themselves in all forms of marketing, then the term gets common use in the marketplace that we're looking for it to get recognition. So everyone is part of the solution as far as this thing goes as well. Associations have a critical role, no question. You know, we've got to build and maintain those traits to make sure that they're contemporary. We need to promote what it means to be a professional bookkeeper to the wider community. It's a joint role to push it out there, so that the term gets used and used and used, and it becomes second nature. The term needs to be promoted to government in the various circles that we both collectively work in, and associations need to have this common approach to promotion. With the approach to government, Matthew, you got any thoughts there? The term, how can we carry that flag through into government consultation in your mind?
So what I see happening is over the next short period of time, and maybe it is the next 90 days, we're going to establish these definitions. And the session later in this week, which is joined by the associations to you, which is going to flesh out some of those characteristics and traits a little bit. These two discussions are going to lead into the web pages that both of us will have on our respective sites, where it explains, professional bookkeeper explains the traits and talks it through. Then we're going to start pointing government to that definition and that understanding. So as Pete said, it's going to be an evolving discussion. We're going to push them to have a conceptual understanding of the term professional bookkeeper. Remembering, as we've said there, professional bookkeeper, you're experienced, there's evidence of commitment, and part of that evidence of commitment is you've been endorsed by one of the professional associations in the space. So you've signed on to a code of conduct, you've signed on to being professional and their codes of conduct. And we're not saying you've got to join both ABA and ICB, although Pete would quite happily accept both of us. But one of us, you need that endorsement by one of the professional associations in the space, because that is one of the traits of being connected to the community and being connected to your development. So Pete, I see it evolving. I see that as your organisation, our organisation and others actively get behind the term, we've set the definition, we've put it out there, people are going to start checking that the bookkeeper they're talking to is meeting the characteristics of a professional.
Yeah, and we don't want to steal the thunder for our group meeting on Wednesday, I think it is, where they're going to, we have actually fleshed the term out a little further, and they're going to share with the greater community some of those traits that some of the things that we've explored as far as this designation goes. So that's one to look forward to on Wednesday, I think, from memory.
I think so.
Yeah, so that will be good. We're starting to run close to time. I guess probably it would be remiss of us to ignore the fact that we're both sitting here with green screens and we're not in, well, actually I'm in my office, but I know you're not. And a lot of Australia isn't. We haven't used the COVID word so far, so maybe we just sort of in our wrap up. Massive disruption to the community, massive disruption to business. And I know we've got a COVID session later in the week, Thursday, I think, from memory, which I don't want to go too deep in this, but off the cuff, your top couple of learnings out of it.
Pete, to me, what is really evident to survive an event such as COVID, and in other spaces, it's previously been bushfires or floods or some event. Frankly, I see a future cyber event happening where all of a sudden we're going to be disconnected because the internet will be blown up for a couple of days. Some of us can think back to when the ATO, somebody kicked a cord out of the ATO's computer and we were offline for 4 days. These sort of events, and what COVID, I think, has shown us is there is a real need to stay connected. There is a real need to lean on each other. How would some of us have got through this if we weren't having ad hoc, informal, supportive type conversations? How would we have done it if we weren't tapped into, oh, there's another government announcement. How do I do that? How do I respond to that? Or there's a government announcement. Should I even respond to that just yet? So, Pete, yourself through ABA, us through ICB, what have we learned? Stay connected, watch, don't overreact and jump at shadows. Even sometimes shadows are in the form of, can I say this out loud, a treasury fact sheet. And from a treasury fact sheet to something that actually is in place, there is a long, long journey and a lot of other detail.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it. It's not. It wasn't. You wouldn't say it was a happy time, but even trying to take some positive messages out of it. The connectivity you spoke of, that was a big deal. Like the government were making up the rules and implementing them on the run. So literally laying track in front of them as they were going along, and we're trying to pick up the ball and disseminate information. So without that great level of connectivity with government, with associations, with bookkeepers, the bookkeepers' ability to deal with some of that stuff would have been greatly diminished. So I think that connectivity was a big deal. The positive message, a couple of other positive messages, there was adaptation. So there was bookkeepers our community had to adapt to what was going on around us. So I think there's a lot more bookkeepers out there who are more strongly connected to technology. And there's a lot more technology solutions that they will probably stay with them on the other side of COVID, which is great. So that was a really pleasing outcome out of it. And there was as I said, there's a positive outcome, but I salute the profession for absorbing, like, stress at a bookkeeper level has been extreme. So not only have they got their own stresses to deal with in keeping their business together and all the rest of it, and family and all the connections, by and large, they also acted as buffers for their clients, and they had stress transfer from their clients who were going through the same stuff. So our guys did an absolutely amazing job. For those that struggled on it, you've done a great job. So yeah, that's probably the messages I took out of it, and I'm looking forward to life the other side. Resume normal transmission, as they say.
So 2021, Pete, what are you really hoping that 2021 brings to us, and what are you looking forward to? Maybe we forget how to spell COVID. What else is on your?
Oh, look, 2021. I asked a question the other day at MYOB podcast thing, and it was, has the world changed forever? Is there a new normal and all the rest of it? And I might be old-fashioned or something, but I'm looking for resume normal transmission. I'm thinking I'm going to wind the clock back 9 months to pre-COVID days, and we'll go back to the way we used to do things. So there's no better interaction than face-to-face and shaking someone's hand and getting stuff done in a real sense. I'm sure we've got some technology that's going to not change, but it's going to be a tool that we will use as part of the arsenal. But I'm looking for a return to normal transmission. I love to go to a real conference and speak to real people, and so I'm looking for a return to normal transmission from our bookkeeping community. Some will have lost clients, no question. I'm looking forward to 21 and say people are going to have to do a little bit of marketing. So there's going to be a need for some to grow their client base. Some more adversely affected depending on where they are in the country. If they're in a heavy lockdown state, there would be a lot more business carnage than some other places. Or if they're heavily disposed to one type of industry, you might have more carnage from say from hospitality or food and what have you, and retail, which has done it extremely tough. So I think there will be a need for marketing, but I'm looking forward to. Well, I have to say, what I did find interesting is I thought, oh, this is going to be, April came along and I thought this is going to be the end of the world. And for 2 weeks, we had a few bookkeepers ring in and say, oh, the world's going to end. I'm going to have to cut off all my subscriptions, you guys included, the vet, the milkman, everyone's been cut off. I'm going to climb under the bed and see this thing out. And so, well, look, people said, listen, you've already paid for this month. Why don't you hang around and the world continued to turn, the information flowed, and they go, geez, I couldn't have done without you. And we've had I think we have very few members depart. In fact, we've had a growth period through this. So I think I'm looking forward to it with a fair bit of optimism. I think by and large, our community has taken the knocks and is going to be ready to power on. And I think their challenge is going to be mostly with their clients. These guys they've taken the big financial hits, and some of those still we don't know whether they are going to survive or not. So they're going to be spending a fair bit of time, I suspect, with their clients in a budgetary sense, in part, be more careful and closer monitoring, so that I think there's a role there for bookkeepers to grab their clients, make sure that they're going to financially survive, because I think there's a little bit of false sense out there of a business's performance through this period of time. There'll be those that have received Boost and JobKeeper and Boost 2 and all the rest of it, and they're sitting there with money in the bank saying, oh, it's going really well, thanks. But if you stripped out of their profit and loss statement the revenue that won't be recurring, like JobKeeper and Boost and all the rest of it, added back the expenses you're not paying, like maybe you've had rent rebates and all the rest of it, and just normalize your profit and loss statement, forget the money in the bank for the moment and saying, geez, we may have a problem here, Houston. So I guess it behoves our cohort to maybe take the discussion up to their clients and look forward and say, where am I really at in a profitability sense, and are there any icebergs we need to be ducking? So I think it's a creative time in front of them, and I think there's a lot of work to be done with clients. And but I'm overall extremely optimistic about 2021, mate. But I don't live in Victoria. That's my rider.
Well, I'm also optimistic. I think we will have a developed normal. I think the world will be different. I think you call that on, we're using different technology, we're using different software. Many businesses have gone online. We're going to see shops shut. We're going to see shops and retail outlets go online. We're seeing a different shape of retail really existing in a lot of spots. So I think it is. What am I looking forward to 2021? That we will be doing things better. That we will have used this crisis to all of a sudden realize we had to put a different technique in place. And that technique's not all bad. And it's not all crisis management. It is actually a better way to do it. And there's been many discussions in our community about, I really didn't realize that accountant who I've worked with really is an interesting character and maybe I don't want to work with them, or that client really has not valued my advice and my time and my busting a gut to make sure they got JobKeeper or they got the cash flow boost. And we all know there's lots of background work that some of us have put into some of our clients. So what's 2021? It's a developed normal, using the best of what we've had to quickly embrace over the last 6 months. And for the rest of my answer on that, you're going to have to come to my 2 sessions on the future of the bookkeeping and what do the next 90 days look like. Pete, just in closing, any final words that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yes, mate. Look, thanks for putting the idea forward to join the Global Bookkeeping Initiative. It'll be fun. I recommend everyone jump on and see what both organisations are doing. There's a fair bit of work has gone into what we've put together. So I hope everyone takes the opportunity to consume some of that, which will be good. And then, mate, other than that, it's a pleasure catching up and onwards and upwards.
So likewise, thank you very much, guys, for joining with us. Thank you for listening through the time as we wax lyrical about where we're at and what's on the table. That term professional bookkeeper, watch for it to develop, watch for it to set benchmarks out there, and for us to just change the narrative about what is some average bookkeeping versus yourselves, which are professional bookkeepers. So look at those benchmarks and look to achieve them. And on that note, from both ABA and ICB, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to talking on another occasion. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, mate.